I am back in Bangkok now, and checked into Holiday Inn again. I love its location in Sukhumvit 22 area. This morning, I ordered 2 Egg Benedict for breakfast, and it's done perfectly, and it was served at a poolside table, as usual. The breakfast buffet is included in the price of $50 per night, which is cheaper than the lowest motel in America. Yet, I have not met more than a dozen of fellow travelers in the hotel at any time. Around the New Year celebration should be Thailand's tourist high season, but Bangkok's overall hotel occupancy rate is 18%, and Phuket is 16%. While COVID-19 and related travel restrictions around the world is the obvious reason for the lack of tourists in Thailand, the oversupply of hotel rooms, restaurants, and other related sectors is a huge problem in Thailand, too. There are so many apartment buildings remain empty, Airbnb price dropped significantly as well. I stayed in central Pattaya's famous building, the Base, with a fabulous rooftop swimming pool, for $22 per night. Yet, you can see building construction sites everywhere. This is a site next to the Holiday Inn, and this one is next to S31 Hotel. These construction projects started before COVID hit. Afterwards, some could not continue, such as Pattaya Pier condo building abandoned, while others continued. Thus, oversupply issue will get worse. Although I recorded some busy Patong beach scenes in Christmas time, no one should be fooled by one spot at one time. The sad truth is that Phuket's overall hotel occupancy rate is at 16% low. If the tourist industry's performance is such dismal right now, when the high season is over, and Thailand's weather becomes too hot and humid when March comes around, what would happen then, even without the Omicron ravage as some experts predicted? Here is what Tiger has to report a couple of days ago.
TAT Governor Yuttasak Supasorn says the threat of another COVID-19 outbreak is affecting travel sentiment. According to a Bangkok Post report, he expects New Year travel to generate just 8.04 billion baht in domestic tourism revenue. He said, quote, concerns over a possible outbreak of the new Omicron variant have affected local tourist plans for the New Year holiday. The TAT predicts that reduced spending in the period from December 31st to January 3rd will confirm the downturn in travel demand compared to other holiday periods. They say this is due to both a slowdown in the economy and the emergence of the highly contagious Omicron variant. The Bangkok Post reports that domestic tourists are expected to generate 8.04 billion baht in tourism revenue from 2.63 million trips. The Bangkok Post reports that Yuttasak believes that even without a lockdown, a serious COVID-19 outbreak would directly hit tourism and the overall economy, given that purchasing power has not had enough time to recover. This means domestic tourism would be unlikely to improve significantly in 2022, with trip numbers and revenue remaining the same as this year.
Thai government made a prediction on domestic tourism in 2022, which was as dismal as in 2021, but it did not make a prediction on international tourism. Why? It was because they would not know what the Chinese government would do in terms of letting Chinese tourists come to Thailand or not. That is the elephant in the room. According to this chart, Chinese tourists were the single largest group visiting Thailand in March 2019, close to 1 million in a month. Here was what Morning Post had to report.
Increase in arrivals from China in the past decade, 10.5 million in 2018 alone, makes the Chinese a huge revenue source.
I always say, if someone say I don't like Chinese, or send to me. If you're living in Pattaya and if you work in this business in Pattaya, you never hate the Chinese.
I was here in Pattaya in December 2018, and I witnessed busload after busload of Chinese tourists in groups flooded the beach, restaurants, hotels, and Tiffany shows. I took these pictures to post on my Facebook, joking that it was a Chinese invasion of Normandy landing. Some of them did not follow any rules but their own, causing others resentment. Here is what a Chinese American and his Chinese Thai friend had to say in a video.
While we were in the queue, there was like a party ahead of us that was trying to cut in front of us, and they just walked past us. And then one was like, "Fucking Chinese people."
My mom also does the same thing too. There's actually a huge, I won't say hatred, but overseas Chinese people generally do not like mainland Chinese people because of, the whole etiquette. They usually cut in front of the queue. For the most part, they're pretty rude. Whereas like Chinese Malaysians, Chinese Singaporeans, Chinese Americans are definitely more on the less rude side. So there's kind of a, not hatred, but dislike towards overseas Chinese and mainland Chinese people.
Like it or not, more than 10 million Chinese tourists in 2018 generated huge amount of revenue for Thailand, and many people's livelihood depended on their business. To this day, you still see the leftover of that legacy. Phuket drivers, Pattaya bar girls, still holding signs with Chinese characters. Welcome Chinese friends. Drug stores are not usually catered to tourists, but so many of them use Chinese written on the doors and billboards. We speak Chinese, or we welcome Chinese. The problem is that very few Chinese tourists could be found anywhere in Thailand these days. Due to the constant influx of tourists, many Chinese citizens move to Thailand to do business, opening up Chinese restaurants and renting houses to turn them into Airbnb type of rental properties, catering to the needs of Chinese tourists. Now, they all but crushed, leaving their skeletons all over Thailand. Some Thai business people hope that after the pandemic was finally over, the Chinese tourists would be back to Thailand as they did before. This may turn out to be a wishful thinking. Evidence suggests that Chinese government is actively preventing its citizens to leave the country, not just for the COVID reason. This young lady arrived in Bangkok 1 month ago, and her blog about her journey out of China is entitled, "It is becoming more and more difficult to leave mainland China. Unless you have urgent business reasons, you will be turned back at the border." The Chinese security interrogated me for a long while, checking my phone carefully, especially my chat history. So, when she was eventually let go, she was so hysteric, and she characterized her experience as horrifying. She witnessed many others being turned back for lacking legitimate reason to leave the country, and tourism is not a legitimate reason at all. Look, Beijing has been creating international tension both in Taiwan Strait and South China Sea for a while, so that it could tighten domestic control under the pretense of patriotism and national security, just as it did in Hong Kong. Now, massive population surveillance, sending the young to the army school, while organizing the old to renew their loyalty to communism and the party leader, are the characteristics of the Xi Jinping era. Would they let millions of tourists loose in Thailand, where they could do whatever they wanted? Would that contradict the regime's tightening domestic control mission directly? I don't think Beijing authority would be that stupid. Therefore, Thailand's tourist and related economy have to take this China fact into consideration, and adjust its operation without Chinese massive tourists at least in the foreseeable future.